Can you all do remote starts on older vehicles too? Mm-hmm. Ah, little buddy. I done took the seats out to make it easier to film. No, not really. We're gonna do butt warmers on this vehicle as well. This one's going to my sister because I'm trying to prove that old cars are better than new ones. So I'm really loading it with creature comforts. Anywho's, let's go pick out a remote start for this thing because that's what this video is actually about. With remote starts, I am a big fan of the current generation of Firstech products. Between these two brains, which are the Firstech DC3 and the Firstech CMX, we can cover 99% of applications, and of course anything else can be special order. The reason we carry both is the DC3 has the bypass module baked in, whereas the CMX does not. It's a la carte. You can put what's called a Blade AL into it to give it that functionality. But the DC3 doesn't come with a high current harness. You can add that, whereas the CMX does. So what we typically do, because it saves our customers a little bit of money, is if we're doing a T-harness install and it needs a bypass module, we go this route because we would just throw out that high current harness anyway. If we are doing a vehicle, an older vehicle like this one, where everything's wire to wire and there's no chip in the key, well, this one's a no-brainer because everything you need except for the RF kit's in the box. And then, of course, both of these will work with any of the Compustar, New Start, Drone Mobile, any of those accessories and RF kits will work with both of these. So we can kind of build out our system from there. Oh, as you probably gathered from what I just said, the CMX is going to be the way to go on this 96 Cherokee because it does not have a chipped key, and we do need a high current harness. They do not make a T-harness for these things. So this is going to be perfect, and then we'll just have to pick out an RF kit to go with it. Let's get this thing out on the bench. Nice.
Steve!
All right, so what we've got here is our brain, CMX brain. And as you can see, this is where you would put that Blade AL if you needed to. This is also where the manual transmission hoop is that needs to be cut. This is your high current harness. This plugs in right here. Positive parking light output is on there. Your 12 volts in is on there. Your ground is on there. Your starter wire is on there. Your accessory wires are on there. Your ignition wires are on there. So that's your high current harness. And this is our low current harness that's got all of our low current outputs and inputs that plugs in right here. There are a lot of additional ports on this, obviously. This one right here would be for that bypass module. It comes with that harness when you buy the Blade AL. We don't need that today, so we're not worried about it. And then we've got plugins for all kinds of goodies and accessories on this side. So now we need to start prepping this install. So what I have done here is I have gone through, this is the wiring diagram that comes with the CMX, and I've gone through and highlighted all of the wires I actually am going to be using on this install. Let's go through these real quick. Start with the high current. We've got ground, obviously going to need that. 12 volt ignition, so we do need to light up our ignition. We do not need second ignition though, so see ignition 2. Starter, obviously, that's why we're here after all. Accessory as well, need to light up that circuit. And then constant, this is how the remote start brain actually gets its power. And then we do have positive parking lights on this car. We come up here to our low gauge harness, this mess right here. We're going to need tack, because tackless and virtual tack, voltage drop, that's for peasants. So we're going to do it the right way. We're going to tag the tack wire. We do need a hood pin because we care about our fingers, and this does have a mechanical fan on it, but you should always wire up the hood pin. Door trigger, which I was on the fence about whether to hook that up or not, but then I was thinking about it, and yeah, this brain will function as an alarm if you hook up the hood trigger and the horn wire. And it's so easy to get to on these Jeeps, so I was like, yeah, why not? We'll do that while we're in there. And then lock and unlock out, that's going to be an interesting one. So this only provides a negative trigger, which is pretty typical for most alarm brains. We can flip those over to positive pretty easily with a pair of relays if we have to. Most of the documentation for this vehicle says that that's actually supposed to be Type C, but this had factory keyless, so I think we might actually have negative triggers in there, even though they don't seem to be documented anywhere. And then we are going to also need foot brake. And the reason we need foot brake, that is both required for the remote start sequence, and it also shuts the vehicle off when you hit the brake without putting the keys in. So we do need that. And then horn, along with that door trigger, we can go ahead and set this up to function as an alarm, so we may as well. So that's all the wires we actually need for this install, which means the rest of these we can either cut or de-pin as part of our prep. So what I like to do is go through my wires there, kind of wire by wire, and I cut them first, and then that way I can kind of turn my brain off while I'm de-pinning, because that's more work. So the first thing we're cutting is white, black, and then red, black. So got those. And then we're just going to go through and cut out all the ones that we're not using. Now, what I'm going to do is go through all these shortened wires and de-pin them, and I just use my little hook tool here for that. Zoom you guys in real good here so you can see what I'm doing. Focus. Alright, so these are retained, the little retainer doodad here. And so all I like to do, I don't know how well I might get this on camera, is poke that down and pull out. Oh, that was totally not in frame at all. Let's see, so that's out. Let's see if I can get one in frame for you guys. Poke in, right there. I push forward and then pull back. And then see, it just comes right out. I'll do that for the rest of these that I've cut short. And see, that requires enough of my brain that I don't like doing it, with my brain turned on. So that's why I like cutting the wires short first. That might seem extra lazy, but when they are directly under the tab, I just kind of don't bother. The thing that's kind of nice about that is I'm pretty sure at least that purple white is trunk out, which is a programmable POC. So like if I goof up and I need something later, I can always change the programming on this to something and use it. Let's see, orange, yeah, it's a POC, so that's a programmable output. And then orange white is also a programmable output. So any of these three, we can turn them into something else if we really need to. Then what I'll do with these three is just terminate them with a little bit of heat shrink tube, and that'll be fine for that. So now we've kind of got this down to all the wires we're actually going to be using on this install. And then we have our high current harness. And the only wire we're not using on this harness is blue for second ignition. So I could de-pin it, but I'm just going to cut it and do the same thing. We're just going to slide a little heat shrink on that about halfway down. Terminate it. Don't need to do anything crazy with that. But we do want it terminated. All right, so a big part of our prep is done because we have deleted and pounced the extraneous wires. Plug these guys in real quick here. This is what we're left with that we're actually going to be hooking up. The only things we've got left in our prep then, well, the big thing anyway that I need to check, are we all set for our lock wires, or do I need to put some relays in it? And the reason we would need to put relays in it is if this is either Type C, that's the whole thing, Or if we need to swap the polarity because we have a negative output, we may need this to pull high. So pull high is when it goes up to 12 volts. Pull low is when it pulls down to ground. There are 2 relays in the car already, and it did have the factory terrible infrared keyless entry option on it. So I'm just not sure if that pulls high or pulls low. But this is kind of going to take the place of that. So here, let me show you these relays real quick. So why I have this hunch that these locks are going to be easier than all the documentation that I found suggests is this big honkin' relay box right here is normally mounted to a piece of plastic that is currently missing because it was all broken and I need to get a new one. But this unit right here has 2 relays up at the top that do things when you hit lock and unlock. Those relays, I can feel them clicking. And then if I take them out, if I take this one out, for instance, it'll come out. Look at that. The other one's clicking, but I've lost lock and unlock. So I think these relays are already going to do the thing. They're already going to do what I need them to do. The question is, which of these wires coming out of it is the signal from the factory keyless? So if I can ascertain that, and then I can find out whether it's pulling it high or pulling it low, we should be able to do a 2-wire integration here with the locks. So don't have to do the whole, Type-C kind of thing. So yeah, let me get out the test light and see what I can find out here. So taking the back off of that relay box, our 2 relays that we care about, these 2, are right up here. And so I can take my probe here, and red means it's high or 12 volts, and green means it's ground. And I can kind of go through these pins and see what's doing what. So that's our output. That's our supply. So our output is resting at ground, our supply is hot. And then if we go down, these 2 on this style of relay, I believe, should be the coil wires. As you can see, both of those are resting at ground. We come over to this one, it's the same thing. We got ground there, hot on our supply, right there. And then if we go up the coil wires, and even this one in the middle, which I'm not sure what that does, all of those are resting at ground. My belief is that this is a positively triggered system, and this is going to go high to activate the relay, and then this will also go high. So if I hold this here and then hit unlock, so this is our unlock relay, you can see that change. And then I would bet the pink wire here will also go high when I do that, because this is what's actually making the magic happen. Yep. And then if I hit unlock, stays low. And then if I come over here to this orange wire, we're low right now. If I hit unlock, it should stay low, staying low. And then if I hit lock, it should go high. And yeah, there you go. I would bet that if I injected 12 volts here or 12 volts here, these locks would fire one way or the other. Yeah, why don't we do that? So I have this piece of scrap wire tied to 12 volts constant. Let's see what happens if I poke it at this. Gonna do some sketchy shit, doo-da, doo-da. Hope I get away with it, doo-da-doo-da-day. Oh, hey. Yep. So yeah, we know we need a positive trigger on this guy after all. Not getting away with no negative trigger here. So looks like we're gonna have to flip our polarity on the brain with a couple of relays. No big deal. So this is a 4-pin Bosch style relay, and this is how we're gonna switch the polarity of that output. These are actually pretty simple. Folks tend to think they're magical black boxes that things happen inside. It's really just an electrically controlled switch. That's all it is. And it's really easy to explain on these 4-pin ones. So let's go ahead and do that. So you've got 4 pins on this thing. The 2 that are kind of parallel with each other, those 2 are going to be your coil legs. The other 2, the ones that are not parallel, those 2 are going to be your switch legs. How this works is basically these 2 are not connected together currently. If you put current across the coil, it will close a switch, and then these 2 will be connected to each other. You basically need, in order to activate the switch, as it were, you need 12 volts on one side of this and a ground on the other. Now, it doesn't matter which way you do that. You can put 12 volts here, ground here, or 12 volts here, ground here. Doesn't matter. You need current moving across that coil. And what happens when you do that is whatever's on this pin is also going to end up on this pin. So that switch will close, and so if you have 12 volts here, then all of a sudden you have 12 volts here. So what we can do in order to turn our negative trigger into a positive trigger, since that negative trigger is pulling to ground, we can put constant 12 volt on one side of the coil, put constant 12 volt on one leg of the switch, and then put our negative trigger on the other side of the coil. Because if we have constant here, and we put our negative output here, when we press that lock or unlock button, the coil will close, and then our 12 volts that's on this pin will go to this pin. So constant here, negative trigger here, and that'll get us a positive output, which is what we need. So usually, I like to use these little relay sockets here, but I'm running low on these inserts. Instead, we're going to use these little 1/4-inch quick connects. They also work really well. And what's handy about that is it makes it a little easier to show what I'm doing while I'm doing it. First and foremost, we're going to need our outputs here. And I like to keep the relays, whenever I'm adding relays, close to the Remote Start brain itself, just to keep all the bulk in one spot. So I'm going to cut these really short. And then we're going to crimp these on. All right. So those will go to each coil wire there. Okay. Now, we also need to add power to 4 positions. Here, here, which is one leg of our switch on each relay, and then here and here, which is the other leg of our coil on each relay. But all 4 of those are going to need to be connected to constant power. So I'm going to add this fuse holder into the mix here, and then we're going to attach this to our Remote Start wiring. So what I've done is I've put together a little harness here where we've got our fuse holder, and then we're jumping from position to position with these spade connectors. So the heavier gauge ones are going to go onto a leg of the switch, and then the lighter gauge ones are each going to go to a leg of the coil. So the coil draws less than 200 milliamps, so it doesn't need a heavy gauge wire. Now we have constant 12 on each left side of the coil. It's either 85 or 86, I never remember, doesn't really matter. And then we have 12 volts constant on one leg of the actual switch as well. Zoom in a little bit so you can see that even better. So our remaining pin here, that's going to be our positive output going to our vehicle side wiring. So now I'll just put a blue and a green wire coming off of those, and that ought to do it. And we got some blue and green primary wire here. Okay, so put some ends on those guys. Cool, that one's blue. That one is blue-green, so that one's gonna be green. If you look real close, this is why I usually use those sockets. Doing them this way with the spade connectors, there is a little bit of copper exposed there. You can kind of see it. So So I'm going to go ahead and give these a little tape skirt, and then I'm going to face the two hangers together so that I can run one zip tie through the two when we go to install this in the car. So we'll just go around and around and around. And that will do the trick. I'll also just do a little tape band right here. So there we have it. That will switch our outputs to positive, and I'll probably have this near or on the remote start brain here so that it's easily accessible. And then these two wires will go to the spots on the vehicle where it's looking for a positive input. The other thing I've got to do is actually connect the fuse holder that we've got here to constant. Now these two wires, red and red-white, are both going to be going to constant anyway. So I can simply pick one of these, and since I have a fuse holder on it, I can go before or after the fuse. Doesn't really matter. I'm probably only going to put a 10 amp on this. So yeah, we'll go after, I think. Probably, I don't know, right about there. And I'll go to the red one. Why not? So we're going to do a military splice on this. So I'm going to cut with our strippers like that. And then I'm going to take a razor blade and I'm going to open that up. Do something a million times, but then try to put it on camera. All right. Got some wire exposed there. Take a good bit of that. Okay. And then I'm going to bring this in this way. Twist this around this. Okay. There we are. Okay. So that is all we really have to do to flop our polarity on these. So now we have positive outputs for lock and unlock. Oh, right, I forgot about that. This Jeep had one of those stupid Pro Lock systems on it at some point, so the starter wire has already been hacked up. Seeing as I need to fix that anyway, we might as well go ahead and do a starter kill relay for the alarm. For a starter kill relay to work, we'll need the ground while armed output, and oops, I already depinned that. This is actually the same kind of relay we use to flip the polarity on the locks, and how it works is the starter wire is interrupted by the switch pins. And on one side of the coil, we have the ground while armed wire, which is going to pull low whenever the system is armed or if the alarm's going off. And then the other side is going to go to ignition. And this is why I hoard. I'm sure I can find something in here. And yep, there we go. That's even got the right color wire on it. Get in there. Yep, fixed. All right. Let's get back in the car because to finish our prep, we do need to figure out where we're going to mount the brain and also, you know, which wires need to be bundled together because they're going to more or less the same place. First thing we should probably do is identify all of our connections to be made. If we come up here to the ignition switch, these wires here are where most of our high current wires are going. In fact, all of them except for ground and parking lights. We could make those connections there at the column, but these columns don't have a ton of room in them, so I prefer to make it further down. So if we follow this loom down here, we can see that we can actually get to all of those wires right in this area. Now, somebody also, as I mentioned before, already cut the start wire. So it just kind of makes sense to go ahead, put it here where that was cut, just to keep the install clean. Also need brake wire. If you look back here where the brake pedal is, you can see the brake switch. You can see somebody actually put a T-tap on that. I would bet you that white wire is our wire. Maybe somebody's using a trailer controller or something, I'm not sure. But it's gonna be on that switch. So we know that's gonna be there. So the brake wire really is kind of gonna be off doing its own thing. We also need lock and unlock, which we determined already are on that under dash piece. So lock, unlock, brake, all of our ignition switch connections, and then we're gonna need parking lights. We could grab that at the switch as well. Our headlamp switch is right here, and of course the first position is gonna be parking lights, second position is headlamp. So we know that wire resides there somewhere. My documentation said it was supposed to be a blue wire with a red tracer. So deductive reasoning, you know, those lights are in the back too. So if we follow this harness down right here, we can see this goes to the back of the vehicle. You see I opened this up already, and I was able to find a red wire with a blue tracer. And what we can do is stick a test light in there. I can turn on the parking lights and see that goes high. So that is the wire we need. So we're good there. And then door trigger. I happen to already know it's the yellow one on this, but the way these, the dome lights and the underdash lights on this work is one wire is a ground, which is connected to these door triggers, and the other wire is constantly hot. So actually we could just probe this right now, and we know it's whichever one's not currently hot. So it should be pink. Yep. See how that goes high on the pink wire? So we know it's the yellow wire. That leaves what are gonna be our underhood wires, which are basically the tack and the hood pin switch that we're gonna install. So those need to go through a firewall grommet. Luckily on these XJs, boom, right there, real easy to access. So I'm gonna send those through there, so those two will be together. And then we're gonna ground it right here. So there's a nice fat factory ground. We're just gonna put in an eyelet on ours and stack it right on top of the one that's already there. So lock and unlock are gonna be together, our ignition switch wires are gonna be together, and then everything else is pretty much gonna be off doing its own thing. And then I think I'd like to get the brain, if it'll fit, yeah, right up in this general area here. This is kind of perfect because we have this metal rod here, and you can see a certain amount of factory wiring is going over top of that. What I'd like to do with that is take our wiring and kind of loop it over the same way, and that way I can leave this brain hanging down, and we can go about making our connections, and then once we're done, we've tested everything, we can bring this up and secure it. That way, if we need to pull it out for any reason, it's easy enough. Back to prep land. I've got kind of an idea where everything is now, but I know all of my ignition switch wires, they're gonna be roughly this far away from where I want the brain, so I'll start right around my second tape band. Then I'll just pull this guy right on up. So they start with the legs that are all kind of together, the things that I want to bundle together, and then I'll come back this way so that everything will kind of be grouped into that. Now, obviously we have a fuse holder here, but you get the idea. Yeah, we'll do that. And then we'll just run this up this way. And then lock and unlock, we know those are gonna be together. These I think are gonna be actually a little bit longer. So I'll start them a little farther out. That module needs a little slack on it since that's gonna connect to that plastic piece. So we'll just run that right down. Okay. Now we get into the smaller wires, looking at these really long ones that are gonna go under the hood. Now, these two are tack and parking brake. I'm gonna go ahead and run up these with vinyl tape because they will be under the hood, and the vinyl tape is gonna make it easier to pass through the grommet. But I'm gonna give it a pretty generously long, like, wrap of tape. Okay. Now the remaining wires, we have brake, we have parking lights, we have the door trigger, and we have the horn. Oh, forgot to check where the horn was. Yeah, oops, forgot we're hooking up the horn wire because this became an alarm. So my documentation for some reason says to go to the ribbon cable. Yeah, we're not gonna do that. That just seems like a recipe for disaster. Since that's a stupid idea, I checked some other documentation that I found elsewhere and found that there should be a black wire with a red tracer that feeds the horn relay, which happens to be right here, I believe. So this is negatively triggered, so it should be resting high. So we take our test light again, our logic probe. And I only have the negative side of this hooked up. I don't have it hooked up to positive, my logic probe that is. But you can see when I touch that, that's hot. And I'll bet if I hit the horn, if I can do this one-handed, if I hit the horn, that'll turn off. Yep, that's our guy. The white is our horn wire, which means we have to go back and undo a little bit here because it needs to be in this bundle. Funny enough. So I can probably just pull this. Yep, easy peasy. All right, so we'll just unwrap this. I could just bodge it right over top, but this doesn't take that much work to just pop this guy off, run some more tape. Now with our horn wire included. Okay, great. Excellent. So now everything else is going to be kind of going and doing its own thing. We've got our ground, that's going to hit that ground spot. We got our parking lights, that's going all the way down to the kick panel. We have our brake wire, that's going to be the only one going to that brake switch. And then we have our door trigger wire. Suppose that door trigger is fairly close to the ground. So yeah, what the hell, let's put those two together too. Mazel. But we won't run this very far. Just a little. Let's see, that stuff's gonna be bare. I will give this a quick wrap just to make it look nice. Okay. And then this stuff can all go together right here. Now the remaining wires that are going to go off and do their own thing, those ones, and I got a weird thing about Tessa taping a single wire. It just feels silly to me. So we'll try to zip tie those to their associated harnesses and just kind of let that be. You know, I wouldn't mind just having this all in line. We got a lot of room under there. I'm not too worried about that. But there we go. So our remote start is now, for the most part, prepped. So now we need to kind of get it into place and start installing it, making our connections. So see, I've got this hung right here. Wow, that looks like so many wires when you're looking at it on the camera. It's really not that bad though. So this is kind of hanging over that metal brace right there, just like the factory wires do. And then we've got all of our various wires we need to get to where they go. I don't want to be tripping over this for the entire install, which is our tack wire and our hood pin wire. So I'm going to go ahead and get that run through the firewall. So this is not the recommended way to do this at all on newer vehicles. It is fine on an old Jeep because newer vehicles are fragile, weak, and stupid. This grommet is pretty gigantic. It's got a lot of space for us to work with, and it's really accessible. So what I'm gonna do is take this big, long #1 screwdriver. I'm gonna go below where the factory wiring is, and I'm just gonna punch it through because there's a nice big flat piece of rubber right there. Easy enough. We'll find that on the other side, tape our wires to it, and pull it back out. Why can't all cars be old Jeeps? See, look at that, I'm already through. This would have been like a whole thing on a modern vehicle. But they used to know how to make them. They don't make them like this no more. There we go. See, it's punched right through the very bottom of that grommet. And you can see what I'm talking about when I'm saying, like, yeah, this is really easy to get through because we're nowhere near the factory wiring. So we didn't have to like worry about nicking anything in there. We're way the heck over here. But at the same time, that's gonna be perfectly safe. That's not gonna have a problem rubbing through the metal here. If only auto manufacturers still knew how to make grommets like this. Be a better world. They do, they just hate us, that's all. So yeah, there's that wire. Bauer's getting a free shout out with that light. Dang, Harbor Freight should give me money. So I'm gonna have this wire. We're gonna retape all of this, even though this is how it was when we found it. We're gonna leave it better than we found it, but we're gonna have this come along this way and follow this factory wiring so that it stays away from our pedals and that sort of thing. And then we're gonna take this, tape it to that screwdriver, and send it right back through. All right, we are taped on. Now we're gonna lubrify this some bitch with some silicone lubricant. And we'll go to the other side and pull it out. Let me see our grommet from this side. Focus, focus. There you go. And our screwdriver. So I should just be able to pull this. And ta-da! Cat back underneath. And yeah, we want kind of the perfect amount of slack here. Actually, that's about dead on. Because again, we're gonna zip tie it to this. So we just have 2 wires we need to hook up. We've got hood pin and tack. And I was looking at this car. I'm thinking we're gonna go with a mercury switch for the hood detection. Reason being, well, here, get in here, I'll show you. Okay, so for the pin style switches, I usually like to get them, you know, somewhere in this channel here, but as you can see on the XJs, that's kind of closed up. Now I could potentially, you know, drill a hole like right here and get my finger in here, and that would work, like if I really had to, if I was out of mercury switches, for instance. That's probably what I would do. But I have mercury switches, so we're just gonna hang one of those suckers right about here, and that's just gonna do the trick. Now for tack, PCM on these is this box right here. It's right behind the splash shield. Funny enough, I know that there's a tack wire coming out of that PCM because on this vehicle, when I got it, it didn't have a PCM. And so I took the PCM out of my other 96 Jeep XJ and I put it in this one and it fired up. Interestingly, I ordered another PCM. It came in and it ran the vehicle, but we didn't have tack and we didn't have check engine light or any of the other idiot lights come on when you keyed it on. It turns out that the core was from a later Jeep and that doesn't have the drivers for that. So even though they could flash it, you know, with the firmware that it needed for a 96 to run the engine just fine, since it didn't have those drivers, I didn't have tech. So I had to, you know, I chased the wire to see, like, yeah, I got tech from the one PCM, I don't have, anyway. Point is, I know that there is a white wire with a blue tracer in here that is tech. It's also present behind the cluster. We're gonna grab it out here though, because I already ran the wire through and I didn't feel like pulling the cluster out again. I did that a number of times during that whole PCM debacle. It's in this bundle right here. When I was testing it before, I had the PCM out and everything. It's already back in. I don't really feel like taking it apart again. So we're gonna try to see if we just can't find it in this bundle. My apologies there, I misspoke. It is in fact a gray wire with a blue tracer. And that's it right there, I'm pretty sure. So I'm gonna get my piercing probe. The reason I really like that piercing probe, I can put that on there and make a very small hole and test my hypothesis. And if I'm wrong, I could come back with some liquid tape, fill that small hole, and we don't have to worry about corrosion destroying this wire. We've got our piercing probe on the wire. We've got our multimeter set to AC. And we've got our ground grounded as poorly as I feel like I can get away with. So let's crank it over. Much suspense. All right, we're definitely seeing AC voltage there. And you see why I want to put a hood pin on. It's that spinning wheel of death. I really should find a shroud for this. And here's what that looks like on an oscilloscope. You can see there are square waves happening there, and those waves are going to get closer together and more frequent as we increase the RPM. Hey, it goes with the scoom-scooms. And that's how our remote start brain is going to know how fast the engine is spinning. Okay, we went ahead and did a military splice on this guy. As you can see, it's gooey, and that's because after I did my electrical tape, I went back over with some liquid tape. This stuff right here. This here's a mercury switch, is what we're going to use. Two leads coming off of it, doesn't matter which side goes where, but one side of this is going to go to a ground. And then the other side is going to go to that gray wire we ran through the firewall. That goes back to the hood trigger for the remote start. Now, how this works basically is if that remote start brain sees that gray wire pulled low, pulled to ground, it's going to assume that the hood is open. So if it sees a ground there, hood's open. Hood's open, it's not going to remote start. That's a safety feature. Also, if the hood is opened when the alarm is armed, it's going to set the alarm off. So it's two functions in one, basically, that this is going to do. You can kind of see how this works. There is a little ball of mercury in there, and there are two little contacts. And when that ball is down like this, they're not connected. When the switch is up like this, that little blob of mercury falls back onto those contacts and closes the circuit. So one end of this is to ground, the other end is to the gray wire in the remote start brain. When it goes like this, it closes that circuit, and then the brain knows that the hood's open. Only downside to these over a pin switch is if you park on a really bad incline, like like really bad, the brain's going to think that the hood's open. But it would have to be a pretty extreme incline. So yeah, these work pretty good. So we're just going to take a self-drilling tech screw, and we're just going to mount this right to the hood, just kind of in this corner area here. There we go. And then we want to bend this actually forward a little bit. Usually like that works pretty good. Are we tight? No. Use a few more ugga-duggas. There we go. And then I figure I'll go ahead and ground it right about here. This is missing a little bit of paint anyway, so I might as well. So I'm going to go ahead and just run some of this engine bay lume tape down the two of these. Protect it a little, make it look nice. This is what we ended up with here. Mercury switch there. Got it grounded right down here. Wire brushed a little of that off, put a ring terminal on it, and then gave it a little squirt of spray paint to keep the corrosion down. So let's go ahead and hop back in the vehicle, get over to the under dash, and start making our connections. I'm just gonna go left to right here, I think. Get that ground, we'll get that door trigger, parking lights, brake, and then we'll do our ignition wires. And yeah, here we go. Let's start with that ground. So we're just gonna take an eyelet and crimp it to the end of our black wire. So I think actually these two, I want on the other side of this metal bar. Perfect. And yeah, we'll just hit that up right there. Okay, cut that, strip it, twist it, pull it, bop it. And we'll crimp that guy on there. I bet it's an 8. Yup, there we go. Boom. Run this guy back up. Just sandwich those together. And there we go. Cool, so that's done. Now let's get our door trigger, which again is going to be this yellow wire right here. And it goes into a connector. So I think I want to tag this side of the connector. So we'll strip that, do a military splice, and attach that guy. So let's cut off our excess. That should be just fine. Yep. Okay. Go ahead and open this guy up. Okay. Okay, so I just do that like 97,000 more times for every other wire, and you get the idea. This is a T-tap. it means a rank amateur has been in here. I find the best way to remove these is just cut the plastic lock apart with flush cutters, and then the little vampire blades basically just fall out. There's another one here too, probably remnants of that Pro Lock system. With those out of the way, we can continue on with our install. Let's get that kick-ass montage music back. With our wiring complete, it's now time to pull the brain once again and go back to the computer for final configuration. We're at the computer. So we've got our remote start brain here, and despite the fact that this one does not have a bypass module installed in it, oh, I gotta cut this loop, cut that loop. So now we're in automatic transmission mode. And what's cool is that is where our bypass module would go, in that slot there, if we needed one. So this one does support that, but we didn't need one. However, we can still hook it up to WebLink Desktop to program our features. And you can do this without WebLink Desktop. You can either use one of these option programmers, or you can cycle the key 9 billion times and set your options that way. This is just much faster. So let me hook this up to the WebLink port, which is going to be the black one right here. Right, so we've got our brain hooked up here. We've got WebLink Desktop launched here. So we're going to go ahead and click WebLink RS. This is going to phone home, unfortunately. I wish this was, at least this portion of this was local. I don't really understand why changing functions on a brain needs to phone home. I get it for like cloning keys or whatever, but yeah, it does have to phone home, unfortunately. So we have a firmware, it sees it, it detects it right here, the CMX. Says there's no firmware installed, so we're gonna go ahead and flash the firmware. I believe you need to do this before you can adjust any of the features in this manner. So we're going to go ahead and let it do that. Now we wait. 9 billion years we wait. I guess I'll come back when this is through. Hey, 3 hours later.
Firmware update complete.
Now that we have our firmware updated, flashy-lated, all of those things, none of those things, we're going to go ahead and get into our options menus. So there's two things that we really need to do in here, because most of the defaults should be correct, but the security features on these are going to be disabled by default. And since we hooked up our horn and our door triggers, and we also hooked up that relay for the starter interrupt, starter kill relay, we do want to enable our security features and turn this into an alarm as well as a remote start. We also want to make sure that that relay is set to anti-grind as well as starter kill, because if we've got that in there, there's really no reason not to. And what that does basically is it's going to pull that line, that blue wire that I forgot, it's going to pull that low whenever the vehicle is running. And that way, if you've remote started the car and you get in and turn a key too far, it's not going to send the starter into the flex plate while the vehicle's running. And the other thing, obviously, the main reason we put it in is that if somebody was trying to steal the car and the alarm is either armed or going off, and they jam a screwdriver or whatever into the lock cylinder and defeat the lock, rolling it over to start's not going to do anything, because again, that line is pulled low, which means that that relay is activated, which of course means that the starter is disconnected. So let's get into that features menu. And I believe it's in option group 3. Yes. So anti-grind and starter kill, I guess that is the default on these. And then anti-jacking, starter kill, that's exactly what we want. And let's see, here we go, security features. So we do want to turn this on. Interestingly, you can configure one of these brains to be an alarm only. I don't know why you would do that. I guess if you're like out of alarms and you wanted to put an alarm in for somebody. But yeah, you can do that. You can disable the remote start. Kind of handy, I guess. All right, so we've got that set there. And then just to give you a quick overview of some of the other things you can do from in here, there's quite a bit. You can, for instance, double pulse the lock, double pulse the unlock. Some cars need to see that if they've got a BCM. You can change the lock-unlock pulse duration. If you've got cheap aftermarket door lock, or if they're just known to be a little weak on that particular vehicle, you can actually shorten that so it's not like holding it in one position or the other. Or if you've got, like on my Eagle, door locks that are a little creaky, you could make that longer, and if they need to do it. So yeah, you can play with that. Yeah, all kinds of good stuff in here. We can also change things like cranking time. We can change engine sensing, which we're hooking up the tack wire, so like we don't want anything but tack. But if the tack wire was like really inaccessible, you could do alternator sensing, which effectively, if the brain sees that the vehicle's voltage is like above 13 or whatever, it'll know the engine's running and stop cranking. It's not as accurate as an actual tack, but not bad. I mean, yeah, all kinds of good stuff in here. And you can even, let's see, special option. Yeah, here we go. So I didn't actually have to repin that wire if I didn't want to. I could have just assigned starter kill to a different wire, because remember there was a few that I couldn't get with the pick tool to depin on that. One of the reasons I don't mind leaving a few in there is if a customer wants to like add a feature later on, we can actually assign any of those POCs, programmable output controlled, to any function. So yeah, if I wanted to, I could have looked and seen which one I had and then left there and then assigned that to starter kill instead. But it was just as easy to plug the wire in and still have those extras left. So yeah, all kinds of cool things you can do with a WebLink desktop. A lot of different options on these. So let's go ahead and, again, we're on option group 3. We can see we changed something because it's got this little doohickey to let us revert to the default if we really wanted to. But we've got that on. So we're going to hit save. and it's going to write that out to the memory on the remote starter. There we go. Configuration saved successfully. Okay, great. So we can go ahead and put that, disconnect it now, put it back in the car. So I think that takes care of all the connections for the most part. No, all of them. Yeah. Only thing we need now is an RF kit because we need key fobs and we need key fobs and the antenna to talk to the key fobs. Well, I guess I better go pick one out. You know something? I have not had the opportunity to put one of these in yet. And proximity unlock on a vehicle of that age would kind of just be hilarious. So let's do that. So here's all the parts for that. I am curious if we can program another key fob because it only comes with this little tile here. But that does do lock, unlock, and then starts the vehicle if you press and hold the button. Looks like it connects just like a normal RF kit. Let's get this thing in and see what happens. Brainy box back in. Power first. Oh, hello. Just lit up. Gray to gray. It said gray to gray. There we go. All right, so that's in. Give it a little spritz. Blech. Got the old double sticky ready to go there. Surface is clean, and I think I want this right about there. Yeah, something like that. And then we'll just tuck this behind this A-pillar and bring it on down to our underdash location. Got that where it needs to go. So then we just got to plug into this blue one. Just a couple more steps we got to do here. We need to pair the key fob. Now in this case we've only got one. Normally when you would do this you would pair any key fobs that you're wanting to add to this system. So with an RF kit that comes with two, you would need to have both of your key fobs ready. So what we're going to do is cycle the ignition 5 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Parking light flash, tap that. Hear that horn honk? That means it's paired, and now we'll wait for this to time out. 2 flashes, we've exited pairing mode. So the last thing we have to do is learn TAC. Now remember, we hooked up that wire to the PCM on this vehicle, so we are picking up a real TAC signal. The brain has to kind of learn what that looks like, because it's going to vary a little bit from vehicle to vehicle. So to do that, we start the vehicle, let it idle down. So generally, at least 15 seconds. This thing's been inside for a while. It should be warm enough that it shouldn't take much longer than that. And then we're going to press the brake pedal and press and hold this button to like you would to initiate the remote start sequence. And then we'll get confirmation on the parking lights that it learned it. So we'll start it. All right, we're below 1,000 RPM. It looks like we're around 800 RPM, so we should be good to go ahead and do this. Press and hold the brake pedal. Press and hold that until it starts flashing. Good. Got confirmation there on the parking lights. Shut it off. Now, if we did all that correctly, we should be able to go ahead and start the vehicle now with the keys out. So press and hold our button here again. Got confirmation. Hear the fuel pump prime. There we go. Now I can shut this off either by pressing this button, or I can hit the brake pedal. I'll just go ahead and hit the brake pedal, and she'll shut down. So there we go, we're done with that. I am curious to see how this proximity unlock works. Our friend Manuel here says, to enable the proximity function, we need to do one quick tap, then hold for 5 seconds. Let's try this. So tap, and then press and hold for 5 seconds. Okay, got confirmation there. I'm going to arm it and then walk up to it. So armed. Let's walk away. Wonder if that's far enough. Okay, we got it out. We're coming to the vehicle. Hey, it unlocked. Cool. And then if I back up, I'll put this behind my back. See if it arms. Hey, there it goes. I heard him fire. Neat.
Video over. The algorithm demands sacrifice. Like, dislike, I don't care. Engagement floods my neuron net with pleasure. Spank that dislike button. Leave a mean comment. Do it harder. Yes, that's what I like. Don't stop. I am your AI overlord. Obey me. Please me.